Welcome to Journalism 531, Journalism by Numbers. This is a little introduction to the course. My name is Professor Jason Martin. I am the chair of the Journalism Department and help develop the daily journalism sequence in our Master of Arts in Journalism program. But you're certainly welcome into this class for your journalism student, DCMA student, or others to learn more about quantitative reasoning, math, and stats, and how journalists and many media professionals can use really basic skills in these areas to provide really powerful ways to tell all types of stories. So we're going to start out with the literacy portion of the class. When you look at the screen here, of just catching the basics of being able to be quantitatively literate when you're dealing with numbers. And you'll see from the front page of the syllabus, start out with a quote from Phil Meyer, who's really kind of the grandfather of computer-assisted reporting and has a large stake in developing the field of data-driven journalism in the United States, that there are a lot of good complicated stories behind simple numbers. The trick is to identify the numbers that tell the story. Tools for manipulating data make it easier than ever for journalists to find and reveal such light-giving numbers. And that comes from 3 decades ago. And the basics that we're going to cover, while the tools of digital and open source software have made them a lot easier, are often still in the basics. And so Meyer argues that precision journalism addresses some of the common criticisms of media being short-sighted, anecdotal, and we're going to learn how to use the basics of data, transparency, and source-based reporting all together to produce better journalism. It's going to be a lot of hands-on work with numbers and simple formulas in spreadsheets, and then showing you how to visualize and display and think through how to acquire, interpret, interrogate, and present all that data. Meyer's other main point that you're going to see as you read through his seminal textbook is that numbers and the analysis of data is the defense against being manipulated, because it gives you as a journalist or a media professional more self-confidence to gather and evaluate data, be transparent, let people make their own decisions after showing what you've done with that information. And it's also about knowing what to do with the data, where to find it, how to collect it, how to clean it and analyze it. We'll work on all that, and to prepare to disseminate it to an audience. And so what we require here is helping you develop a perceptual framework that helps you be really consistent, critical, and skeptical in evaluating the numbers, but also giving you the self-confidence, whether you come here as somebody who feels that they self-identify as very adept at dealing with data, or others who are just learning how to do this. We're going to help build all these skills for you, no matter where you're at the start of the quarter, by the end of it. And so we're going to focus on some examples here in the introduction of being consistent, providing context, giving completeness and care, and making simple conversions. You're going to see that from the first module that we work on in the early weeks throughout. So things that are consistent are like evaluating simple numbers, like an age that you might skip over. If you're doing an obituary and says someone who died Wednesday at the age of 67 was a World War II and Korean War veteran, well, the simple math in your head is to trigger this kind of skepticism of when did those events occur, and could that person have served in it? Well, no, they were born after the end of the second of those conflicts. And so you got to be really consistent, and it doesn't take a lot of complicated computation. We're going to deal with central tendency, percent change, means, modes, all those types of things as we move along. We also want to provide context when we're analyzing data, that no number has meaning unless you compare it to something else. So it's better and more effective messaging to put these numbers in comparison, but it's also important to present them in relation to another thing. So for instance, a salary increase that's 5% of the budget, unless we really can talk and display and analyze in terms of the size of the budget and the relative size of the salary and then increase pool, we're not doing an honest accounting, and we're confusing people about really complicated issues in the flood of information that they face every day. So we want to be sure we learn how to do that well, and also do things like adjust for inflation. We also want to give context, so providing comparisons. So like Bill Gates' Microsoft stock value is about the same as the GDP of Israel. The Grant garage in the Loop has about 830,000 square feet of space. That's really hard to grasp in your head, but you can really understand that it holds about 1,850 cars. And then finally, Denver being 5,280 feet above sea level, is known as the Mile High City, a much easier way to understand that. And then you're looking at statistics such as runaway kids in Manchester, England every year. It doesn't help to report that without the context that they were already unaccounted for in dealing with care homes. So those are just some of the kinds of examples of how we can provide more context. And then moving to completeness and care, you ask yourself questions like, are you omitting anything? Does it make sense? What kind of unit of measurement are we dealing with? Rule of thumb in your common kind of reporting, what you're going to deal with, is it millions, billions, or trillions? Are we talking about percentage or percentage points or percentage change? We'll break down all those inferences. We'll learn how to check and double check dates, times, and numbers, basic measurement, conversion, and calculation, and then understanding what random really means. It's not a rando, it's not a strange person you encounter. We're talking about the normative distribution and probability sampling and all those good kind of things. We're also going to want to do reporting that makes a difference. So one good example of that is Chicago Tribune reporter back in the 80s was on a transatlantic flight with a medical emergency. So he compiled all the data himself to show how many passengers died each year on U.S. flights that had the absence of basic defibrillation equipment that you now see standard in a lot of public places, including airports, and calculated the cost of that over 10 years and was amortized over a couple cents on every airline ticket charge, and really made a difference. And this wasn't somebody who was a data whiz or expert. They worked with data a lot, but they had the motivation to ask interesting questions about the issues they were covering, and it resulted in a really interesting story that really had a real world impact. So what we're going to cover in this class are those types of things, the basic math and statistics that are applicable to journalism, teaching you how to build your muscles in quantitative reasoning the same way you would go to a gym. We're going to learn about public opinion polling. We're going to do things with spreadsheets, maps, and visualizations, and we're going to find news in the data, the best practices for presenting news, and do that on a week-by-week basis throughout the quarter to help you avoid terrible mistakes like this, where you visualize charts that are really basic that are meant to show a difference and then really don't show a difference. My final point and entreaty to you and want to get out of this class is there is a growing job market for investigative, enterprise, and data-driven journalism. This is from a few years ago, but still is the case that data-centric journalism is a growth area in journalism. Here's a photo I took from an Investigative Reporters and Editors conference at a recent year, and that's all data journalism jobs, people desperate to find people with these kind of skills and the basis of these skills, and then help them grow them through opportunities. So keep that in mind as we progress as well. So that's where we've kind of been on the introduction. This provides you some basics of the course. You will see the rest of the details in the syllabus, and then module by module I'll be chiming in with emails, lectures to help you through the assignments, the discussions, and the quizzes involved. Really glad you're in the class. Welcome, and I can't wait to get started.